This is a submission for the April 2024 Anthropic Build with Claude Developer Challenge. I'm going to jump right into it here and talk about the project, which is Marketmon. And the idea of Marketmon is that you can collect, trade, and battle with cards based on real companies from the S&P 500. And you'll kind of see what this looks like as I go along through the presentation. So, originally, for this contest, we wanted to identify some sort of challenge that we could try to solve, at least in some way. And the problem that we identified was there's kind of a lack of fun or dynamic way to introduce the stock market, particularly to younger audiences like a middle schooler or a younger high school audience. There are like virtualized stock market games where you can buy and sell stocks with like fake money, but we don't think this really is a great way to teach the stock market just because there's a lot going on, and just directly following the stocks and whatnot as a first step for like an education purpose doesn't really make a lot of sense to us. So we wanted to make something that was a lot more fun while also tying in certain attributes of the stock market that could help motivate people to learn. So the first step in making our project was this creature generation pipeline that we had to toss together. So the goal at the end of this was we needed a creature for every company in the S&P 500. So we started out with just a essentially like scraped Wikipedia list of company ticker symbols. For each of these symbols, we had to pull in a company description and some other financial data from Yahoo Finance. And then we combined this like company description with an example creature description, which we had preemptively made directly with the Claude API. So we made one example we thought looked good and then used that as our example template. So company description, the example creature description, and then added a single token for a prefill to send to Claude, which was the like left brace that is at the beginning of every JSON object. And this was just to help cohesion and getting a JSON response back that we could parse easier. So combining these three things together, we pass that on to the Claude 3 Haiku API. We chose Claude 3 Haiku specifically because we're all everyone on this project is broke college students, and we needed the cheapest method possible. So we chose to use Claude 3 Haiku. It ended up actually working perfectly well, awesome for our use case. And it was kind of the glue that tied this whole pipeline together. So once we got a response from Claude, that was a generated creature description, a name of the creature, and we tied that together with a custom styling prompt. What this custom styling prompt is essentially just a string of some additional attributes that we wanted this image to have on top of just the creature. So these would be things like the anime styling or like the card art style of this type of image, kind of like the drawing features. We didn't want it to be like a hyper realistic or 3D render. So we passed in those additional keywords into the stability API, which is what we used to generate images. We were using Stable Diffusion XL version 1 through the API, and this would result in our final creature image. You can see here that the example card that then this was actually created with this. There was no manual processes to create this image or the name. And you can see the name that Claude came up with was Burrito Don, which is, I think is pretty funny. And it was generated from Chipotle. And you can see here the image that got generated is like some sort of beans and rice monster thing, which is, I think, pretty cool. And really the point of all of this being tied together is if we were to just pass in the company description alone to stability, the results would not be nearly as varied and wouldn't be very cohesive. It wouldn't really generate a creature. It would probably just generate some sort of like building or company. And so having Claude be like the intermediary where it could interpret what the company does and then make a description of a creature based on that was what tied everything together. And that's where Claude comes into our project. Moving on to like the UI components, how did we make this interactable? Not just generating cards on the back end, but actually making things visualized. We use Svelte for all of our UI components and everything. Our team loves Svelte, so we chose to do that. And then for the cards, we actually used custom CSS styles. So we didn't rip styles from anywhere. We didn't use any sort of library. We came up with all of the card UI things ourselves. And we kind of took some inspiration from Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, but tried to add in kind of our own elements, which you'll see in like the stats and the sector things and whatnot, which we'll get into a little bit later. Looking at the individual card level, not only is it like unique styling, but all of the stats are actually unique to the company. So these are not just arbitrary numbers that are being thrown in there. Each of these stats is actually directly tied to financial data that's gathered from Yahoo Finance. So the HP is tied to the market cap, and each of the other stats is actually tied to one of the line items in a financial statement. We wanted to get representation from all three financial statements. So growth is tied into the income statement through last 12-month EPS growth. Attack is tied directly to free cash flow through the cash flow statement. And then defense is tied to shareholders' equity. So we have kind of the triad there. And then at the card level, the color and the sector of the card, which is in that technology box down there, is based on the sector of the S&P 500 that the company is in. So NVIDIA is like technology, Target would be like consumer, and we have that broken down from Yahoo Finance. On the game logic side, we had to create our own custom game logic to handle what a player could do and like the rules at each turn. We took elements from other card games, as mentioned before, but this is more on the logical side. So like think Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. We took like a inspiration of like types in Pokemon to do sectors, but then Yu-Gi-Oh probably more closely matches the way that the game actually plays, and all of the game logic is ran client side. And then balancing the game was actually a huge difficulty for us. We realized when we gathered all the data for the cards and the companies that using those metrics directly for the cards, like for example market cap, would make companies like NVIDIA or Microsoft way too overpowered. They would essentially be unstoppable. And so we had to normalize the data based on the percentiles of which these statistics fell into. And we applied that normalization to every metric. So all the stats you see earlier, we normalized. Now, moving on to the actual like UI component here, we have kind of a home screen where we have this scroll that just endlessly scrolls through all of the different companies that are in the data set. And there's kind of a like gallery view over here as well, where you could search for a particular company. So if I search for our friend Burrito Don from earlier, you can see Burrito Don's chilling right here. We have other ones. There's Financier for the Charles Schwab Corp. We have Google somewhere. Oh yeah. Oh, Alphabet. That's right. I don't. Whoops. But we have Omnisphere for Alphabet, Aerojet for American Airlines. So you can kind of see these were all generated through that pipeline that was described earlier, and it actually results in very unique and results that we think actually matched a lot of the companies very nicely. So yeah. Moving on to the actual gameplay itself, it's relatively simple and the UI isn't anything too crazy, but we did want to just get it working to a state where it was somewhat playable and mostly functional, just because conceptualizing a lot of the game logic took us a really long time. So you can see here, there's two pools of health, which you can kind of think as like a bank account. There's an opponent and there's my health pool. Right now, we have it dealing a random hand of cards to the player. Ideally, we would have it split up to where you could like draw packs or have an account where you can maintain your cards. But for the MVP, we just have it dealing random cards to each player. So let's see, what company do I want to play here? Let's play Food Mesh. I like Food Mesh. So you can see here we have Food Mesh and Dominion Haulers, what they played for Old Dominion Freight Line. So you can see here that playing either of these cards pulled away from our total health pools. And in order to get more health, or more money rather, you have to grow. And these are the two options that you're presented at each turn. You can either grow or you can attack the other player. So in this case, I'm going to grow. And you can see my health went up. I can continue to grow. and their growth stats very bad, so they're struggling a bit here. And also, if I want to attack, you'll see here if I click attack, this card lost their health. Now, if this card was low enough to where I would do more damage than their total card health, it would subtract from the enemy player. And if the lost state, or like when a player loses, is when no one can play a card, or when that player, if you can't play a card, you lose essentially. So yeah, that's a general overview of the project, and thanks for watching.